the map.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of What's So Funny, a show that talks about the funny with the people who make it happen. You know, even though our guest this week is all over the map, he is truly made in Canada. It's a pleasure to have him back on the program, and you know him as an occasional guest on the popular The Ron James Show. It's Ron James.
Hi, how you doing?
Hello, Guy.
Oh, geez. Well, Sam didn't introduce me. Normally he says,
No.
"Now here's our host." Good
Well, I
Lord,
wanted
I
to
was
be
sitting there
professional.
waiting. All right. Yeah, wow. You got that. You got all over the map, too. Hey, Ron, how was that?
That was great. Thank you.
Yeah. You have been all over the map. And in fact, that's the name of a book that's going to be out soon by you.
Yep, that's my first book. Random House approached me a couple of years ago, and actually he approached me when I was in the middle of the series that ran for 5 years, which you kindly introduced. Thank you. And I didn't really have the time to start it then. And then I was still touring extensively, and I had a new special to write every year. But it was just the last couple of years I really hauled out all the moleskins that I've been compiling over the last 20. And I said, yeah, I think it's time to get into this. And so I did, and I made the submission in May 17th, the first edition. They called me back on the 20th saying the marketing campaign and the signings and the book fairs have been a casualty of COVID. So it's delayed until spring 2021, I believe. And but compared to the prices that people have paid, especially members in my tribe of solo acts and the Canadian Association of Stand-Up Comedians, a lot of good people and great acts have taken a serious torpedo to the bow. And I did a benefit here in my house the other night. And we drew 400 subscribers, and it was the first one I did. And I'd like to do another one in September, and then do a New Year's show here from live from my living room. It's fun.
That's great.
Yeah, thanks. It was weird at first, but it's like when you're a kid. Before you learn how to swim, you're in the shallow end and you're frightened, and then you go in the deep end. You get your badge, and you go, "Just what was I ever scared of the shallow end for?" And so it's just a shift of the psychic paradigm. And I figured, Christ, I've been talking to myself through these four friggin' walls for the last 5 months. I might as well talk to myself on a computer and turn a few bucks for it. So anyway.
Yeah, because normally, I guess, around this time, you'd be out touring the world or Canada.
I would have been back the second week of June from British Columbia. I didn't get to finish that tour in September, and so I was playing the interior, my favorite corner of BC, and through the Slocan Valley and Valley of Lost Souls, and up into Nelson, and the funkiest, most bohemian and affable town in the country. It's really cool. And up toward Prince George, places like that. I always get a couple shows at Prince George, but I just made my living touring Canada, and so I lost 15 dates there, and then I wouldn't doubt it, once the flu season kicks in November, I'll lose my dates across the West too. But it's just you take the bullet and you keep writing when you're home. You just keep pumping it out.
Talking about your book, I'd like to take full credit for it. So I look forward to seeing my name in the acknowledgments.
It goes without saying.
I was looking at an interview I did with you. I believe it was 2006. So that's like 14 years ago now. I asked you, when are you going to write a book? Is there a book in you? And you're like, yeah, I don't know. So I planted that seed 14 years ago, and it finally has seen, it's got some sun and water on it, and it's blooming.
Perfect, brother. People have been asking me that for a long time.
Oh, so it wasn't just me. Okay.
No, but may I say, like the editor said, you write your book when you're ready to write your book. But because you did plant the seed, there will be an autographed copy and maybe a dozen smelts coming in your direction if I'm in Nova Scotia when they're running.
Wow.
Because smelts always put people in a good mood.
I guess I've never had a smelt.
Well, first time for
but I
everything.
have smelt myself.
There.
Sam and I, just a heads up to the listeners, are going to sound even more monosyllabic than we usually do when we're talking to Ron James, because this guy is a poet. The language he uses, if you haven't noticed already, and you've seen on TV and in person all these years, a legend. Like, I'm just wondering, Ron, when you were a kid, did you always have a way with words, or did this develop as you were writing your stand up?
Well, I talked a lot as a kid. There's no doubt about that. And, I was diagnosed with full blown adult ADHD 2 years ago that cost me $1,600 over 3 sessions to get assessed. And I thought, Christ, I could have saved myself the money. When I was 7, I was lost for 3.5 weeks chasing a friggin' bee. So, but we were all storytellers back home. I'm from Nova Scotia, and so we weren't all musicians like that. Perpetuate that kitchen party myth, but there were good storytellers. My father could tell jokes, and my mother liked to laugh, and but over time, I think this predisposition for the enjoying the spoken word just grew. It just evolved. And when I first started stand up, I could see that that style was trying to be born because the words would tumble over each other and the set was dense, and I was very physical and frenetic. I mean, some of those early performances at Just for Laughs are absolutely unwatchable. Somebody called me Stephen Leacock on Benzedrine once. And it was a very appropriate description, actually. And that's why stand-up comedy is all about the long haul, right? You try to tell a young comedian that, and of course, everybody has the answers. I thought I did when I was on stage at Second City in the early '80s. But it's for the long haul. I mean, the first hammer a carpenter picks up, he doesn't build a mansion. He's got to hit his thumb a few times first. And so comedians have to bomb and they have to grow. And that's one of the grudges being my bonnet with Just for Laughs is they own your sets in perpetuity, and so they can play you forever, and that's annoying because everyone dedicated to their craft grows, and you
Mm.
have to grow. So there's a long way of answering your question. That no, I was never verbose as a kid, and I stuttered as a kid, right?
Oh,
And
didn't know that.
yeah, my dad stuttered too, so we were like the stuttering James, the stuttering James.
That sounds like a musical act.
So, well, it sounds like something from vaudeville, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
My father was a Newfoundlander who could really swear too, right? I mean, I was flunking math all the time, and I was scared shitless coming home because my teacher would phone your house if you made lower than 65 out of 100 on a math test. So the test is burning a hole in my pocket like the map of Bonanza, and I lost
Nice
all your listeners.
reference.
Well, I lost all your listeners on that except you, guy. I don't
Yeah.
know, you're what, 73?
Yeah.
Anyway, and I'd get home and my father, Jesus, his tomato head would start spinning. That Newfoundland verbiage would kick in. By the lumped up, gentle German Jesus, you better start passing math, you sawed off little Christer. There's going to be a stranger in hell for breakfast by the Lord snapping arseholes. You know, I kept flunking just to hear the alliteration. Uh,
Yeah.
but he'd
It's on him.
sometimes he'd stutter, so there'd be the both of us there going. He'd be trying to give a bye, 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 bye. He'd be going all Porky Pig on me, and I'd be going Porky Pig Junior back, bye, 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 bye. So we were kind of like the Beach Boys warming up for a harmony in the kitchen. But I grew out of that, and as as you stay in this game of comedy, uh, it's a lifelong learning curve. I read once where British vaudevillian died about 20 years ago at the age of 93, and they said that comedy is the longest apprenticeship in the world.
Hmm.
And I think it's those who feel they have the word and have the answers to everything miss it. I think you should always stay humbled in the face of the work, but that doesn't mean that, and it doesn't mean that material comes easier or jokes come easier. You just have to realize that you got to put your shoulder to the mule and plow. It's work.
Are you taking notes, Sam?
Oh, very much. Yeah, I got my moleskin open right now. Only 20 more years to fill. Um,
Right, Sam, I hear you.
qu-
But you know
quick
what?
question though. You
Yeah.
mentioned so a lifelong apprentice, which makes sense to me, right? The moment you
Mhm.
start thinking you're good is when you bomb harder than ever.
Mm.
Um,
How many years have you been in the game?
7.
Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah, so enough to know that I'm shit. Okay.
But, you shouldn't be so hard on yourself. You're also, in it long enough to know when you've been good, right?
Yeah, oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
good,
this
good,
the
good.
delusions are out the window now. But you said you tour a new set every time you go on the road, right?
Well, I shoot for 70%, and
70%, that's a good turnover.
my show is 2 hours long, so
Holy
I
jeez.
yeah, yeah, and I do 2 hours without a break, and, so off the top, I'll usually customize from the events of the day,
Yeah.
whatever is happening, whatever province I'm in. I'll do my research prior to heading on the tour, and I think that's one of the standards that comedians learn in a hurry. And years ago, there was a radio show called Lorne Elliott's "Madly Off in All Directions."
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was much like the Debaters is today for many people. It was a semi decent payday, and you got national exposure, right?
Yeah.
And it was imperative to customize some content for wherever you were. And I learned my lessons fast because I'd spent 10 years in the comedy mines with Second City, where everything had to be filtered through 6 other performers. And yeah, it just wasn't my medium, you know. I did okay, but and then of course my 3 years in Los Angeles, so that chasing the sitcom dream. So when I came back, and I'd already had well, I'd already been bloodied, so to speak. You know, I'd already been in the arena, and so I wasn't. I was ready to embrace this new learning curve. I didn't. I didn't think I knew everything, and it's an entirely different set of skills doing stand up than it is doing improv.
Mhm.
And I mean, the giants at the form, Colin Mockery and Styles and a myriad number of other people, who are almost supernaturally talented at improv. I mean, you see how absolutely uh, incredible their high wire act is. But with
Mm.
stand up and customizing wherever I was, I thought that was imperative. And I remember one joke I wrote when I was on stage in PEI. Charlottetown Center holds about 1,100, and it's one of the sweetest rooms in the country. And those Islanders come to laugh. I mean, half, 3/4 of the audience are half cut on PEI potato mash moonshine anyway, or some magic mushrooms. But I wrote a joke. I said, I went to Anna Green Gables' place. Jesus, man. I was talking to the docent there. I said, geez, I guess this is where she did her homework at the kitchen table, is it? And the docent said, well, she's not real. I said, what are you talking about? You mean this province has built a multi-million-dollar tourism industry around a fictitious little girl? Holy Jesus, I'm going to open up Spider-Man's cottage. And so you just expand a shitty joke, but it was one of the jokes that got laughs and PEI. And so as time went on and I began to tour extensively, that led to my first 5 1-hour specials on the CBC, where I would customize content for whatever
Mhm.
region I happened to be playing. And I would be able to work a third of the content on the stage. And then I would research and write the 2/3, and it would literally go from the page to the stage in front of a live audience. So I
Oh,
always
jeez.
wrote, yeah, yeah, it went from the page to the stage. I'm not shitting you. And my first one was "Row Between My Ears," and that had a lot of great material in it. I shot that in Toronto. And then the next one, I got a great producer by the name of Lynn Harvey on my next one. And we shot Quest for the West at the centenary of Saskatchewan and Alberta. And then I hopped that Great Divide and slipped into a brand new skin in the happy lands of Shangri-La, where you guys are, that province of polarities where you're either chained to a tree or chopping it down.
Hmm.
And I wrote West Coast Wild, and I shot it in Victoria at the Royal. And but I always wrote I always did a 90-minute show, and I always wrote anywhere between 75 and 95 pages, and I
Hmm.
memorized.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned a high wire act for improv, and I think your act is a high wire act because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so dense. There's so many words that once you get going, if you stumble, that can really ruin it, can't it?
Yeah, yes, indeed. And that's what's tough off the top, breaking in a new piece. I mean, some pieces flow and they stay with me. But I mean, some pieces will flow, but it takes time, right? And I'm judicious as to how I insert those pieces in the longer narrative. Okay. And I always want to make sure that when I've got a long run, that it's going to land on a substantial laugh. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But it is very intricate, and I'm not trying to, blow my own horn or anything like that, but it's crucial that the pentameter of the language also does justice to the end result, which is laughter. People, it's easy these days when it's a mandate for us to be angry at injustice and the polarization of opinion and the madness that is south of the border, and our own racial issues that
Hmm.
desperately need to be addressed in a country with, I'd love to talk about this, a dysfunctional deference for the status quo and authority. Canada
Hmm.
has no predisposition for the rebel voice. I mean, we had one, Louis Riel, in Manitoba, and John A. Macdonald, that genocidal piss tank, hung him, and 140 years ago. And neither liberals nor conservatives have pardoned the man. So you got to be doing something right when Ottawa hates your guts that long. And that's what makes stand up such an anomaly in Canada, because we bought into the myth of our own passivity. And as my daughter, who's a 26-year-old social activist, said the other day when she was protesting defund the police in Toronto, that, Dad, I think it's Canada's passivity that breeds our unique pernicious form of racism. So there's issues that have to be addressed, and it's how you address them that matters. The great comedian Billy Connolly always said, "What's the intention of the joke?" And as far as I'm concerned, him imitating a dozen sled dogs farting is just for laughter. Period. But I like to aspire to. Um, I try to aspire to greater issues, but at the same time, within the context of that 2 hours I'm on stage, as Bill Hicks always said, you got to keep a couple of dick jokes in your back pocket.
Oh, yeah.
The audience needs to hear it, man. They need to hear the salacious. They need to hear, dick fart jokes. I mean, I got a section where I go to yoga and I pass wind in yoga class just as much as I have, a solid 20 minutes on the dissolution of the American dream we've been watching from the cheap seats up here in Canada.
Yeah.
So you got to give the audience an extensive buffet and a lot of choices.
Yeah, with 2 hours on stage, you can do everything. Well, I
I
mean, and it's funny you mentioned Connolly because I know he's a hero of yours, and yeah,
Oh, absolutely. Oh,
you couldn't
Jesus.
do anything less than 2 hours if he's one of your guys. Because
I watched him. I brought my eldest daughter to see him when he was 65 years old on stage in Hamilton. I picked her up at university. We drove down, and he had a throwaway joke off the top that said, "Ah, politicians, they should all be fucked and burned. Fucked and burned. Fucked and burned." And the audience lost its mind. And my daughter, who was 21 at the time, turned to me and she said, "Oh, Dad, this is going to be so good." And so but I met him, right? And the reason he is my hero, I mean, besides surviving an absolute Dickensian childhood that rivaled anything you'd read of in David Copperfield, or
Hmm.
I mean, an awful life, and then being a welder at the Glaswegian docks, and I mean, just Glasgow today is a hard town. I can't imagine what it was like in the 50s. And he doesn't write anything down either. I think he's pure genius, Billy Connolly. Pure genius. And he survived Parkinson's, which I was happy to see. But I met him at Just for Laughs in 2009. He was there, and I was doing my show, and there was a big party afterwards, and he hated those kinds of parties. But I saw him standing there, right, like, and he literally looked like the wizard you'd go visit in the cave, okay,
Yeah.
because he had
Mm.
shoulder length hair, he had that custard beard, and he was chewing on a cigar, and there was some stone faced L.A. fuck with a really weird orange tan talking to him, and Billy looked bored shitless, and my producer Lynn went up to him and said, "Look, my partner here, who we're just doing a special with, just did his concert. You're his hero. He's dying to talk to you." And so I went up to talk to him, and I'd seen him on TV when I was broke and destitute in Los Angeles. His first HBO special. Whoopi Goldberg had seen him at the Edinburgh Fringe Fest,
Mm.
which I played in '96 and was just destroyed. It was, I mean, I knew, I knew the fates had it in for me when I walked outside after a rehearsal for my first one man show up and down in Shaky Town, and I had a poster of my face out front. And it walked out at 1 o'clock, and someone had vomited a big softball size dollop of human puke on my head. And I looked at it.
Just a dollop.
I thought, I don't need to see the Oracle of Delphi to know that this run's going to be a challenge. And it was. I mean, I had two people in my audience that held 75 seats. One was asleep, the other wasn't paying attention. It was an amazing soul sucker of a run that made me stronger. So it was absolutely the Nietzschean adage that whatever tries to kill you will make you stronger. And it made the show a hell of a lot stronger. It's a one man show. And then I brought it back to Canada, and there was a review of how much I got slaughtered in the Globe and Mail. I mean, even a puppet company that went over from Toronto got better reviews. And but I saw a great comedian perform there, and it's really important when you're starting out to watch the greats. And I saw a great comedian perform there too, actually, Rich Hall.
Yeah.
And but who followed him though was Mike Wilmont, and
Yeah.
I watched that giant. We were in a room called the Bear Pit, and it was like Thunderdome, really. It was just fierce. It was 3 floors, and you were in the middle of you just stood small on this postage stamp of a stage, encircled by Scottish piss tanks during a heat wave with no air conditioning. And Wilmot screwed himself to the sticking place and just ripped that room apart. And I remember standing at the back of the stage, and I was only into stand up a couple of years then, and I was still locked into the sacredness of the fourth wall, that theater promotes, that Second
Mhm.
Cities tended to indoctrinate in me, and to stay within the scene, not to break the scene, where stand up comedy is all about breaking the fourth wall and bringing the audience in with you, right?
Hmm.
And so I learned a crucial lesson that night watching him. And it's important when you're starting out to watch the guys who are competent at their craft. And anyway, I met Billy Connolly at Montreal, and I said, "How did a Glaswegian welder become an international comedy sensation?" And he looked at me. He goes, "That's a question about fame. Fuck fame. Chase fame. See what that does to your soul. Sing
Hmm.
your song. Just sing your fucking song." And I've been singing my song, man. I took the page right from that wizard. And people would always say, "How come you didn't play the United States, Ronnie?" And there's times that I bemoan my choices of having not chased the American dream again, but it was working for me up here. I had a family to raise. I was feeding them. I had a special every year. I had the faith of a network at one point, and I enjoyed touring the country. I enjoyed stringing my trap line from coast to coast, hearing the heartline hum of people and place, and the soul note song, whether it was at Head Smashed In, Buffalo Jump, or on the beach in Qualicum, or in Nelson or Thunder Bay, or Saskatchewan, Ontario in the wintertime, everywhere and anywhere. I just felt so fortunate to be able to do this work. I just felt so friggin' lucky. And it didn't happen overnight. It's been a victory in baby steps. I mean, that's why I get pissed off at these Tory trolls online who, when I'll post something or something, accuse me of being a stooge at the CBC. Like, fuck you, buddy. When you were getting your fucking welder's money in Fort McMurray for $162 an hour, I was playing Lonesome Sentinels at a Trans Canada Highway in the dead of fucking February, staying in mom and pop shaggin' shacks that Norman Bates wouldn't run, where the smoke alarm was a dead canary in a cage. Fuck you. You know, they all had complimentary coffee too. I took a sip once. I remember. I thought, if this coffee's a compliment, my wake up call must be a kick in the nuts. Everybody thinks that when you work on the CBC, they hand you a bag of gold that's been stolen from their kid's piggy bank. It's not true, man. All of us in the arts put so many years in obscurity. I mean, a night out for us when I first started was sitting on the front porch, man.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about the long haul, and that's why I, I mean, I'd already been into it by when it was 2009. I saw Billy, so I'd already been in the game since '95 stand-ups when I got my first check, and so yeah. But I tried it several times the years before that, and I just didn't have the gumption. But it was only when I came back from LA and had to make sense of the 3 years I spent down there chasing the sitcom dream did I finally I finally find my voice. And then I had to do amateur night for another 6 months at the Laugh Resort in order to hone my craft. So it's a lifelong learning curve, like that vaudevillian said.
Yeah, I want to talk about your chasing the dream in LA, but first we need to put your acting chops to the test. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can do our station ID.
Okay, where do I? Oh shit! You just disappeared, bro. Wait a second now.
Oh,
Station
I
ID.
did. I'm right here.
No. What am I? Why am I losing? Okay, there it is. Okay. Oh, you ready?
I'm ready.
Uh, this is Ron James. You're listening to What's So Funny with Guy and Sam on CFRO 100.5 FM, Vancouver Co-op Radio. Unless you're listening to us on the podcast, in which case, never mind.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Perfect. 100.5 though. I mean, that's just the way they say it in Glace Bay.
That's where I was born. I was
That's
raised
where
in
you were
Halifax.
born, but you're in Toronto now, right?
Was born in Glace Bay, Cape Breton. I lived there till I was 9. My father worked for the phone company. My grandfather was a coal miner, and my mom stayed at home. But he met her when she was an operator, and then he got transferred to Halifax in '67. And I lived in Halifax until 1980 when I moved to Toronto to get into Second City.
Hmm.
And I took classes for a year at Second City and got in. And I tried stand up then too, but I just didn't. I didn't have the. I don't think I had the gumption to deal with the kind of energy that existed at Yuck Yucks at the time. I don't think I had the backbone to bomb.
Well, it's like writing a book. You're ready when you're ready, and you weren't ready till 95.
You're absolutely right, and I had to. I had just had to follow my bliss, right? And I knew when the series I went down to do in Los Angeles was called My Talk Show, which
Oh,
was
I know.
Mhm.
was created, of course, by Colin's wife, Deb McGrath, a wonderful comedic actress, and Linda Cash.
Yeah.
And so we went down, and we were in Newsweek. Our picture was in Newsweek on Tuesday. We were canceled on Thursday, and Monday I was pulling a tree out of my buddy's front at a Robert Urick's front yard with my buddy's pool digging company. So I was out of work for a year, and during that time, I just to hump my writing, just my prose, throw my name in a hat at Ventura Boulevard coffee houses. This would be in '91, and I mean, I shared the stage with the illegitimate spawn of the Manson clan who wandered down from their Topanga Canyon warrens with their poetry and prose, looking for the love that Charlie never gave. Apologies for doing a bit from my act, but it still resonates to me.
Well, wait a second. Now, my talk show lasted a few years, didn't it?
No, we started shooting in July, and it was off the air in November.
So, how many episodes, though?
We shot 6 half-hour episodes a week. Yeah, it was
Wow.
sold in syndication. Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
It seems like yesterday. It was so long ago, but it seems like yesterday.
I saw on YouTube you you having fun with William Shatner
Oh,
on
that's a
that
good
show.
clip. Yeah, that's a good clip.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the earlier shows. And then as the numbers dipped in the Midwest, the guests kept getting increasingly bizarre. I mean, I had a chat with Tiny Tim eating lunch, man. And Tiny Tim was talking about how great, hey, the best Toronto Maple Leaf I ever thought was Davy Keon. What a right winger. And I was sitting across from Tiny Tim. He was talking about the Leafs, man. It was wild.
Wow.
Chubby
He's a
Checker
strange
talking.
dude.
Well, he was a kind-hearted fellow. And Chubby Checker was one of the later guests who told me that I can't do a Chubby Checker impression, but he told me that he invented mock chicken and his manager stole the idea from him. And the best line ever was, "My manager is a billionaire, and me, I'm still singing the fucking twist." There you go.
Did you ever come across, or did Martin Mull ever come across you
Yeah,
and
Martin
give
Mull
you
was
his
there.
thoughts on my talk show?
Yeah, he wasn't very forthcoming. I never
No,
found. No, I mean, don't forget. I mean, we were doing
Fernwood.
6 half-hour shows a week, and it was trench warfare. I mean, I mean, we'd rehearse 2 shows Monday. We'd rehearse them Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then shoot 3 on Thursday and 3 on Friday. And I
Whoa.
was getting paid a pauper's wage too. It was, ridiculous the money we were paid. I was only paid $450 a show, and by the
Wow.
time taxes, were taken out, I mean, put it this way, man. In 1992, I made $41,000, and I was still audited. There's the guy who's the cause for the collapse in the California aerospace industry, the poverty-stricken actor, barely making ends meet, who had a car that every time he pulled a '79 Dodge Colt out of the driveway, there was a dead seabird floating in the oil on the floor. So yeah, but it was, it's the old adage: whatever tries to kill you will only make you stronger. Like,
Well, you were in show business, right? You were on TV. That's all that mattered when you're in LA.
yeah, but yes, but it's the kind of TV you're on. And uh, had we made more money, it would have been easier because when it was all over, we hadn't made much.
Oh, yeah.
And that would have been, had you been making that network coin, that's another story. But I mean, I just left the series and I was broke. I mean, I didn't get my first commercial until the next year. So I did commercials and I got guest spots and things. But then when the recession hit, it was crazy. And then the earthquakes were coming, and you just realize that your life was going to be at the mercy of somebody else's decision, and whether it's your agent who has to send you to auditions, and if it's the right audition, and you'd go into the audition, and there'd be 15 20 people auditioning for 3 lines on a forgettable sitcom, or you're in the trenches during pilot season. It's not everything it's cracked up to be, and I wanted to use my own brain. I wanted to use my own mind. I wanted to make sense of the world on my own terms. And so when I came back to Canada, that was, the crucible of 3 years in Los Angeles was absolutely the motivator for me to take charge of my life and my own career. And I had a mandate when I came back. I wanted to get it done on my own. I didn't want an agent, and I wanted to create a television series and become a stand-up. And
Check,
and
check, check.
yes, check, check, check. And I had my mission statement, and I achieved it. But television, for me in Canada, besides the specials, uh, has been a bittersweet um, actualization. The first one, Black Fly, had a great premise, satirizing current social and political trends in the context of the 18th century Canadian fur trade. So I wanted to tip my hat. I wanted to be influenced by the way Monty Python dealt with history, set things within a historic context and found the satire there with drawing analogies to current social and political issues. And then, of course, Blackadder. But I was on global television, and global television had an idea about the kind of character I was going to be. And I suddenly became, Gilligan in a tri-corner hat in a fur trading fort. but there was so much promise with it, and it was really remarkable when I walked through the gates of this fort that was built in Mill Cove in Nova Scotia with all the actors that who were saying my words, and I said, "This is validation of the imagination. It's a dream made manifest." And but you need somebody, and you need a network, and you need a production company that is taking your vision and your ship in the same direction.
Yeah, I mean, you wanted or maybe studied to be a history teacher?
Yeah, I mean that's it's the I actually majored in hot knives and minored in binge drinking, if you want the truth.
Ah.
But I always say to people, I'm from a day where a hashtag was something you got from getting too close to the hash knives. So it was one of those things. Yeah, I did. I wanted to do that, but I mean that would have been, you know, that would have been a wrong choice. My choice was to follow my bliss, and I did a couple of plays at university, and I got the bug. But mostly it was riffing with my pals or writing my own stuff for the variety show. That really, I think I knew I could be a stand-up by my final year of university, and that's what I came up to Toronto to chase. But I've always had an affinity for history and historic analogy, and my
Yeah,
bookshelves are filled with that.
yeah, and your bookshelves are filled, period, right? I mean, reading is a big thing. Like, do authors inspire your stand-up as well?
Cormac McCarthy inspired my long runs, actually. In the early days, I know now it was Hunter S. Thompson's rebel voice that was so refreshing.
Mm.
We need something like that now. The printed word with that fiery rebel spirit. I don't think we have that muckraking tradition in Canada. Once again, the deference for authority, is there an equivalent of the Hunter S. Thompson voice in this country? I don't think so. I like Tim, and but no one that comes to mind immediately. I read too much nonfiction, as my
Hmm.
daughter say, "Dad, geez, you're reading a fiction book and not another book on the Battle of Stalingrad. Are you okay?" So, but I think you need to. I think you need to read a lot. I mean, I've read a lot and I researched a lot during my specials.
Yeah,
Uh,
even if you're not maybe directly influenced, just all that knowledge that you're gleaning from these books that you can throw in as a reference, a la Dennis Miller.
well, you know what? Dennis Miller's first show. It's funny you bring him up. Dennis Miller's first show before he became a mouthpiece for the right,
Hmm.
which I heard he became that when he was playing Vegas so much. So they were all laughing at it, his stuff down there. So he kept it. But
Yeah.
I saw his first HBO special a week or a month after I saw Billy Connolly's, and Dennis's first special was called Black and White.
It's the
And
best.
I'll never. It was a great special, and I'll never forget one
Mhm.
of the jokes he had. He was talking about the sanctimonious liberal left. This is the kind of person who'll step over a human being sleeping in a puddle of their own piss to throw a bucket of pig's blood on somebody in a fur coat. That's a good joke.
Exactly.
That's a good joke, man.
Yeah, he's a good joke writer, and
30 years ago, 30
yeah,
years ago, but when
uh,
he began to disparage the drilling for oil in Prudhoe Bay and brought a little caribou on stage to make fun of it, and became drunk on his own point of view, which is very
mm,
dangerous for comedians as we mature.
Totally.
That your own point of view is more important than the audience laughing. I think it's so. You always have to keep that in mind. That's why I love Billy Connolly. He never forgets what he's up there for. And as much as I admire George Carlin, I saw him 6 years before he died in Las Vegas when he was, the vitriolic angry man. I paid
Hmm.
$75 20 years ago to see him. Was it 20 years ago? No, maybe not that many. 15. I don't know how many years he's been gone. But when he'd found his authentic voice, and he spoke for 90 minutes at Harrods to an audience of 2,500 people and never got a laugh, man.
yeah, a little
And
strident.
very strident, and he didn't care to. He just, and I know at the peak of his powers, he was untouchable. But I think he, I think he grew contemptible of his audience, right? And
Mm.
this is why it's going to be a challenge moving forward after COVID. Because I want to come out of this plague stronger than when I went into it. And I play a lot of places beyond the urban core where enlightened points of view tend to prevail and the deference for authority and the status quo uh, are more suspect. And it's going to be interesting to see how I honor my convictions and still make people laugh. But I mean, I got to go back to Second City. The Second City was all about playing to the top of your intelligence. You know, not below it, not above it, but just play to your intelligence. What do you know? And um, always having something to say. And I think it's important to always have something to say, to speak truth to power, to hold power to account.
Yeah, and what I love about you and even early Dennis Miller is you don't talk down to the audience. You don't have to over explain things. You just whoever gets it is going to get it, and other people might learn something if they don't know what you're talking about.
Thank you. That's August company to place me in. I never, ever, ever condescended to that audience, ever. And I don't want to start. Yet, when you hear, I mean, if I go on about Indigenous issues and the egregious role of policing on Indigenous communities in this country, as a 62-year-old white male, when people may have bought tickets thinking, oh, he gets us, right?
Right.
And then I'm on stage talking about the fact that Brian Mulroney launched a Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples in 1996 that came out with 456 recommendations, and not one has been applied. These things have to be dealt with. And I don't think the Globe and Mail is. I don't know what newspapers are, and people are so particular as to, I mean, they've siloed, right? And I mean, I had this joke, and I have to be an equal opportunity offender. You know, I hit the Silver Spoon Dauphin with his marshmallow bromides and his yoga dispositions behind his podium during COVID, as much as I hit that bedimpled little dick from Regina, Andrew Shear. Mark Twain never was an affiliate of either party. So I want to stay there, you know, but I also want to speak out about issues. I mean, Jesus, I mean, for instance, uh, with the first free trade agreement, America's entitled to our water. And I said, if we're going to be giving our water away free, why don't we give it to our indigenous communities, especially the ones strung along Canada's northern boreal gulags? Some of those reservations up there have been boiling their water for 25 years. You'd be safer drinking water from a pissed in puddle at the Mogadishu dump than you would from a tap in one of those places. These is a brown water were coming out of the taps in a Tony corner of Canada like Kitsilano or Rosedale or Westmount. It'd be fixed faster than a horny horse in the Mounties musical ride. It's been 150 years since we called ourselves a country. I think it's about time we honored the treaties and decided to call ourselves a fair one.
Yeah, that's. I mean, just the way you phrase that and the words that you use. That even if people maybe disagree with you, they can enjoy the way you're saying it,
I
but
wanted to
also it'll
land.
make them think too.
Well, thinking's important, isn't it? I mean, you got to think. I mean, there's so much pablum. And, there's a lot of comedians who've gotten very, very rich not making people think. I'm
Mm.
62. I'm going to be 63 January 31st. I want these next 15 years to matter. You know, I'd much rather be hated for telling the truth than loved for lying.
Mm.
And I'm just not going to play to the lowest common denominator. But, sure, I'll keep a couple of dick jokes in my back pocket. You know, I've got my fair bit of Brazilian material. Right? So I got a new one. I said, Jesus, just because Bolsonaro has taken Brazil to hell in a handcart doesn't mean you should disparage Brazilians, right? No, because they cut down on injuries in the workplace. Sure, they do. Why? Because you don't have to go all Courier de Bois blazing a trail through the bush looking for the little man in the canoe. He's right there, waving at you. Jesus, you better sit down, buddy, or we're all going to get wet. So if you put that in somewhere as an adhesive, okay, to, for want of a better phrase, a thinking man's material,
Uh-huh.
then that's great. And that's what you have to do.
I like what you told me in the last time we talked. You said, I'm paraphrasing here, the comedian shouldn't or can't belong to the country club. He's got to have his nose pressed up against the window, or not trying to get in, but
Yes,
not hobnobbing with the power
absolutely.
brokers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's what Joan Rivers told Mort Saul in 1962. She said, let's go for a coffee tomorrow at a local deli. He said, I can't. I'm going horseback riding. Horseback riding? She said, you're a Jew from Brooklyn. Who are you going horseback riding with? And he said, Jacqueline Kennedy. She looked at him and said, you're finished. We're not supposed to belong. Now,
Mm.
I thought Joan Rivers was, abrasive and mean at times, but she knew what tribe she belonged to.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we belong to this tribe of solo acts, and it's a noble calling. And I'm so sick and fucking tired of the powers that be paying lip service to us. I'm so sick and tired of it. Sick and tired of power not willing to take a chance. I locked horns with the CBC too. They gave me a lot of room to roam, but on great material, they dug their heels in. I had a great joke. And you guys know how tough it is to come up with a killer material. You just don't find it under the carpet.
No.
I said, I wish I had the time to cover every malignant statement that danced from Donald Trump's gilded cake hole, but I'm only doing an hour, not a miniseries. The one that really got on my nerves is when he said women who get abortion should be punished. Beg to differ. The only woman who should be punished is Donald's mother for not having one. Which was a joke that killed in every single corner of the country.
Right.
Rural, right? So CBC's answer up now, and not to disparage the young man because he's a nice person, is Johnny Harris talking to Mennonite farmers in Squirrel Corner, Saskatchewan about a two-headed calf. Like, come on, man. I mean, you got to have somebody on there to tip the apple cart. There's so many great comedians out there today. They should have given somebody else an hour show. I understand that I was turfed, fair enough. But why? What about Ryan Belville on at New Year's Eve? He's more than capable of doing that. Pat Thornton, he could have done an hour. There's Pete Zedlacker. Jesus,
Oh, yeah.
very competent, top of the line comedian. And there's female comedians too. Rebecca Kohler is great. Deborah DiGiovanni. Give them an hour. People, not everybody can make a living as good as the show is for exposure doing the debaters. There are
No.
people, you need to have somebody speaking truth to power, not coddling up to it. Right?
Yeah, and there's room for all those styles.
Yes, there is. And even to have so I put that in my book, and when Just for Laughs was a federally sponsored, just weaned on federal largesse, other than last year when thankfully they had Rick Mercer host their cross Canada tour with Hussein and a female comedian. I think Deborah DiGiovanni was at the beginning of it. I thought, oh, fucking finally, good. Because for 10 years, you were getting Canadian taxpayers' money in order to run your cross Canada tours with acts from Britain and the United States. But Canadians take it. And to speak up is to be seditious. To deign to tip the apple cart is heresy. That's anathema to why we're here. Speaking truth to power is why we're here. I was seeing this beautiful woman for a year. Just for a year, we were having a wonderful time. And we locked horns on an issue that was a deal breaker.
Yeah.
She said, no, I used to, one of the old things. Oh, I used to date a cop. Oh, big fucking deal. You dated a cop. Okay. You lived with a cop. Oh, great. Good. But she was pro cop culture. I said, there's no way that the police should be investigating themselves. There's no way. That's like putting the raccoons in charge of the green bin. They'll satisfy themselves, leave a mess, then shit in your porch. It's these things where you have to draw a line in the sand and stand for what you believe in.
Right.
And I think that I think that's where the craft has to go. I think it's where we have to push it. And I think it behooves us, those of us who've answered this calling, because it is a calling, right? This peculiar discipline and craft is a calling, and it's very rewarding. And I think and I don't mean rewards in terms of the boons of showbiz, because you can't see stand up as a means to an end. You have to see this art form, which it is an art form, as a means of expression. And it's our job not to ride in the apple cart, but to tip it.
Yeah,
And we
isn't it
have.
interesting that you would maybe assume that it would be the younger generation who are going to take these positions and rile up the issues, and not a 62-year-old white male comedian, right? But here
Well,
you
aren't
are.
aren't the young people doing that? I don't know.
Yeah,
They have.
yeah. But I mean, in terms of stand-up comedy and comedians, right? You don't expect you to be the spokesman
Mm.
for this.
Well, I'm going to tell you. I wrote with two guys, and then well, three actually. Paul Pogue and Scott Montgomery collaborated on my last four specials, and Pete Zedlacker came in on my fourth one when my dad was dying. And I learned a great deal from these three guys. And they got pushback from me when they started on my series, right? Because I'd been singed by black fly, and I knew the mistakes that I'd made in that room, uh, and I didn't want to make the same mistakes again. So I took a stronger approach, and my approach was wrong. I was smothering their creative by demanding that certain things happen a certain way. And anyway, their enlightened values moved me into a direction where uh, I have every right in the world to respect my rebel voice. And here's
Hmm.
another thing too we got to be aware of, is how we internalize the patriarchy. And women are going on about this all the time, and it's very true, and that's why they've toppled it with Me Too. And I didn't mean to say like, are going on about this like it was, sort of quilting bee track. But when they toppled the patriarchy with Me Too, and Black Lives Matter is charging the barricades, and that's not going to let up. I found one of the greatest historic ironies was that it was the railroad that pushed indigenous people off the plains, and it was the railroad that they barricaded in January. That's not done. Um, our historic narrative needs a rewrite. And if history has boomeranged back, and anyone who cares to read the right books or inform themselves of the issues can be made aware of that injustice. And I grew up watching the Smothers Brothers during the Vietnam War. I was 12 years old, 13 years old. And some of the things they were doing when Richard Nixon had that country in a headlock, it was pretty remarkable to see that level of sedition. And then, of course, came Richard Pryor's Summertime Replacement Show. He did 8 episodes. It was brilliant. And you'd see Jonathan Winters in a locked off room with a box full of hats, and they had the camera locked off on him, and he would just tune up and go, man. So I came of age, and then Carlin's album, Seven Things You Can't Say on TV. But what happened was everybody began to look at stand up, particularly, America, and then moving from Canada to America to get a hold of the Grail, especially when we've lived beneath the neon shadow of Lady Liberty. I mean, we're all strung along the border. We're looking up Lady Liberty's skirt, 80% of us. And it's always been the golden grail to achieve fame and fortune because, Canadian power broken star fuckers won't deign to endorse you unless you're famous in the States. And it's unfair, but it's the reality we live with here, which may be changing. I think now that we've seen the dissolution of the American dream at the hands of an orange mutant. I mean, they called it the Great Experiment. Well, it's been hijacked by a mad scientist who belongs in a fucking Spider-Man comic, not the White House.
Right.
And so I think comedians are going to be able to tip the apple cart in our own fashion and gain, I hope, more respect and acknowledgement of this calling as the art form it is over the next few years. So I'm happy to be the 63-year-old white guy because you know what? When I saw Billy Connolly, he was 65 and he was tipping the apple cart left and right.
Yeah, well, when I said that, a 62-year-old white guy taking this issue and letting the public know, is that the public generally thinks, people get more conservative as they get older. Sounds like you've gone the opposite direction.
I have. I was just thinking that the other day. I was just thinking it the other day. Well, it's because I raised a couple of Bolsheviks, right?
Yeah.
Oh no, 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 no! I made my living touring rowing around the Lake Superior 25 years ago, playing, community centers and church basements and school gymnasiums and one night stands at the far points of frontier. If the world ended tomorrow, wouldn't have started up there for a week later. And I always wanted to get paid. I did my corporate gigs, I did my corporate dance. But a comedian drops an f bomb at a corporate gig, his career's in the shit, or a cop puts 7 bullets into the head of a mental patient. Fucky, he gets suspended with pay and a pension. Fuck that. Game over. Not anymore, man. Not anymore. And why should you? As long as I'm not shitting in a shoebox beneath the overpass when I'm 87, living in a cardboard mansion, snaring squirrels for supper, I'll be okay. And but my daughters, I have to as well. They always say, "Dad, you've got a platform," and I say, "Yeah, but you got to get laughs too." And they said, "You'll get laughs. Just make sure you're saying something." So,
Hmm.
I'd rather them be proud of me than some button-down dick at Bay Street who's paying me top dollar so I can mention his name during a fucking 45-minute corporate gig. And by the way, if you're a comedian and you're making your living on corporate gigs your whole life, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. The laughter will come, but the reason why you got into this game will be sacrificed. And I think you got into this game so you didn't have to follow the rules. You didn't have to follow the spit and polish order. And I don't, I respect people. So it makes it difficult when you have to meet the mortgage and you have to make car payments or you have to pay alimony. Not everybody gets to fill a room like George Carlin did at Harrods with 2,500 people and not worry about getting the laugh. You still have to strike a balance between artistic needs and audience expectations, but you also have to honor your belly fire, I think, if you have it.
And Ron James is the spoonful of sugar to make these issues a little more palatable to people who might not be eh, thinking about them or wanting to read that or do the heavy lifting of reading and learning about the issues in a more boring format.
But I'll tell you, Guy, I talk seriously about the work and the purpose, but when somebody pays $60 to see my show, they deserve to get a show. Okay.
Oh, yeah, they're
They
going to get
deserve
one.
to
Yeah.
get their money's worth because I
Yeah.
want them leaving the theater feeling lighter. I want them leaving the theater feeling lighter than when they walked in. And that's going to be my challenge. How do I deal with these issues and not have them leaving the theater on a blistering cold winter night feeling like I didn't give them what they paid for? So that's going to be my challenge. And I always said, you can say whatever you want, just never lose the room.
Yeah.
But I might lose the room more on occasion these days, and I'm willing to take that chance for the greater good.
For your daughter's sake. Hey, Ron, our time is up, but it's great talking to you as
You too.
always.
Yes,
And
buddy. Too
yeah,
long.
who books that living room gig at your place?
Oh, I do.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
But
but
I mean,
I'm going to do a New Year's show here. I was going to pitch the CBC, and I said, to hell with that. I don't need to get any notes from, you know, from Kool-Aid drinking mothercore apparatchiks. I'm done with that, man. I'm done with it. And so I'm going to do a 90-minute show here, New Year's Eve live, and I'm going to sell tickets online. And we had 400 people sign up for my show last Thursday. And if that's the way of the brave new world we're in, then sign me up, because I'd rather try to make sense of the chaos we're walking through in the language of laughs than sit back and accept it.
yeah. Where else are you going to hear Nietzschean adages and Oracle of Delphi and boreal gulags than tuning into a Ron James special?
Thanks, brother.
Hey, great talking. Thank you
You
so
too, man.
much. Finally, doing What's So Funny after our conversations over the years for the paper.
Fantastic. I love those days, when you guys endorsed, made the time to endorse Canadian comedians.
Yeah.
When, let's face it, I mean, so much comedy that comes into Vancouver comes from Los Angeles and the States. And it's pretty hard to fight an American dream that's been exported to the four corners of the world, that are given status on Netflix and HBO every year. That's huge. And,
Mhm.
it's a tough town to play, Vancouver, which is why I play North Van. The Centennial. It's a nice room. I've always had great shows there.
Centennial
And
Theater, yeah.
yeah, it's a nice room. It's a very giving, very hot room. But who knows? Next time when I'm out, I may drop down to the Orpheum. But it's that kind of exposure in a paper like the Georgia Straight was, or whatever other newspapers deign to cover Canadian comedy, which are few and far between. It matters, and it matters to my tribe of solo acts who are stringing their trap lines all over the country, just trying to keep the wolf from the door. And it's leaner now than it ever was before. So, any of your listeners there who'd like to drop a few pennies and donate to the Canadian Association of Stand-Up Comedians, by all means, they can certainly use it.
All right. Well said.
Okay, buddy.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks,
Stay well.
Em.
Okay,
Yeah,
Lance.
you too. See you
All
guys.
the best. Bye-bye.